Good morning, everyone. My name is Calev Ben-Dor. I'm Deputy Editor of Fathom. I am very, very glad to be joined today by Professor Azar Gat. Professor Gat is an incumbent of the Ezer Weizman Chair for National Security at Tel Aviv University. He was awarded the Emet Prize in the fields of political science and strategy in 2019. He's also a graduate of Oxford University and writes in several places, including Mako, Haaretz, one of Israel's most significant think tanks, the INSS. And what we're going to be focused on today are a couple of articles that Professor Gat has recently written. In one of them, I think it was in Haaretz, you basically argue that the challenge that Israel faces against Hamas in Gaza is, or certainly in the aftermath of October the 7th, is existential. Can you explain why you think this?
It's existential, obviously not in the sense that Hamas is able to conquer Israel, but the Israeli success story and survival have been based on the ability to prosper under severe threat in a hostile environment. Now, if Hamas succeeds in remaining on its feet after the kind of attack it carried out on October 7th, it would mean that everybody in the Middle East get a signal that it's possible to wage ferocious war against Israel without end. This would cause the quality of life. This would turn the quality of life in Israel into hell. Israel must be able, in order to survive in this region, to deter its rival to the extent that they will not choose war as their permanent strategy on a continuous basis.
Okay, thank you. I mean, staying on its feet seems a relatively low bar for Hamas. I think, do you think there's a military possibility? I mean, you've also written about how actually militarily Israel has been relatively successful, that often both outside of Israel and even inside Israel, we don't really seem to kind of accept those achievements. But do you think there's a military possibility of Hamas being destroyed?
So let me explain what I mean by remaining standing on its feet. Hamas is now effective, has been for 15 years now, a little more, has been effective ruler of Gaza and has built the mighty, even more surprising than what we all knew before entering Gaza, a mighty military machine. I mean, the infrastructure of tunnels, some 500, 600 kilometers of tunnels, just imagine. The amount of arms and ammunitions, the training centers, everything. So what I mean by defeating Hamas is to destroy Hamas's military infrastructure, to prevent it from returning to power in Gaza. This is possible, I think, and has been largely achieved in most of the large majority of the Gaza Strip. There is still Rafah remaining, but Israel is now operating there. There are also the so-called central refugee camps at the center of the Gaza Strip. I assume yesterday we saw the release of the hostages there in a special operation carried out. But I believe both of them will be occupied by the IDF in the immediate future. What cannot be achieved is the eradication of Hamas as an ideology, but this doesn't say much. Also Daesh and Al Qaeda have remained as ideologies, but still Their military capabilities have been eroded to near insignificance, but also it's not possible to eradicate Hamas as a terror and guerrilla force in Gaza. That's a very significant change. From what it is now, but then it has some significance in terms of what can be achieved in installing, creating some other kind of political authority in Gaza.
Okay, so I guess you're drawing a distinction between a more or less military force with battalions, infrastructure, etc., which you say can and should and can be destroyed, and a kind of guerrilla movement that will remain. That's unlikely to.
It has largely been destroyed.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we should point out. So we're recording this on Sunday late morning, the 9th of June. It's the day after this very courageous and wonderful hostage extraction yesterday. Which I guess raised the mood very much for people in Israel. How significant do you think this is on a strategic level in terms of the war?
Difficult to say, but my guess is that in terms of the overall significance, it would be not be that significant. The only significance is in boosting Israeli morale after a long period of bad news from on the international arena and on the Israeli border with Lebanon, the slow movement in Gaza, and because of the various constraints, mostly international or U.S. opposition to operation in Gaza, and also the problem in Rafah, and also the problem of the hostages. So it's a kind of morale boost to Israeli public opinion.
Okay, so you've talked about Hamas and destroying Hamas as a military, as an existential threat to Israel. On I think the 1st of June, President Biden came out with a ceasefire parameters that were purportedly also accepted by the Israeli government. There's different stages of it. There's a hostage release at a certain stage. There's kind of this, I guess, a permanent ceasefire. You in one of your pieces were quite critical of Israel accepting that. Can you expand and kind of clarify what your reservations were?
No, I wasn't critical about Israel accepting this, and it's the Americans' claim, and with some justification, I'll explain in a minute, that it was actually originally an Israeli proposal submitted by Prime Minister Netanyahu and so forth. What the thing is that as they say, the devil is in the details, and the question is what exactly the proposal means, and here we have different interpretations by the sides. The Israeli side has never accepted let me explain what Hamas wants. What Hamas wants is an end to the war, a complete withdrawal of Israel from the Gaza Strip, Israeli international guarantees that the war will not be resumed, and probably also guarantees to the safety of its leadership. What I believe will come next is demand by Hamas that any exchange of so-called prisoners, hostages, prisoners, will be on the basis of all for all. That is, it's estimated that Israeli hostages in Gaza now have, are between maybe 70 live hostages. All the others of the 120 are supposedly dead. So we are talking about 60, 70 leaving Israelis, a similar number, maybe 50 bodies, as an exchange for some 10,000 Palestinian prisoners, terrorists, convicted terrorists in Israeli hands, including the perpetrators of the October 7th attack and all the prisoners, Hamas prisoners taken since then, during the war. And not only would that mean a fatal moral blow to Israel, it would also mean that some 10,000 trained warriors, terrorists, however you want to call them, will go back to Gaza to reinforce the depleted ranks and files of Hamas. It will also be a disaster in terms of Palestinian and Arab public opinion. The tendency among there is a great enthusiasm among Palestinian Palestinian public opinion and in Arab public opinion at large over the success of Hamas October 7th attack. And if a deal is struck according to what Hamas wants, that would be a triumph. The Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, already compares himself to Salah ad-Din, and this is how it will be perceived by everybody in the Arab world. So this is how Hamas sees it. Israel is willing to accept a ceasefire of limited duration, maybe 42 days or something like this, for a partial exchange of prisoners. It leaves open what will happen next. There will be negotiations, but it's clear that Israel is going to demand that Hamas leaves Gaza. Israel will be prepared for a deal whereby the leadership of Hamas and perhaps there's the warriors that would want to take this option, leave Gaza in return for the rest of the hostages. Hamas is not prepared for this. Israel is not willing to end the war until its objectives, that is the elimination of Hamas as ruler and semi-military organization in Gaza, is achieved. Now, the American position is more vague. President Biden mentioned several times that he wants to see the Hamas rule over Gaza ending. He didn't mention it as one of his demands at the end of the speech, where one would expect that he would repeat this demand. So the Americans are either on two minds about it, or do not want to be too specific about it. So there is this range of interpretations and options, and since the gap between the Israeli position and Hamas position, and hopefully also between the American position and Hamas position, is very wide, I see little hope of a deal being achieved.
Okay, thank you. In one of your pieces, you
I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. You are mute or something.
Can you hear me now?
No.
This week we just had some technical difficulties that have now been resolved. So in one of your pieces, you were talking about kind of the realm of possibilities. What's possible and what's not? So you write that Hamas, and you've said this already to us, Hamas will remain a jihadistic ideology, and it will still have deep roots in Palestinian society, and it will still probably be a guerrilla force. You are skeptical that moderate Arab forces will be willing to enter Gaza. You say, listen, the PA is still weak, and even when it was strong, Hamas still was able to take over in 2006. Can you kind of run through for us what you think isn't possible in terms of a day after?
So as I mentioned, I think that all the solutions proposed are based on illusions. If only for the reason that there are no. I'm talking to a British audience, so let me make it clear.
Understatement.
Yeah, there is no such something like a solution in the Middle East in general. Solutions are, a very questionable concept as far as the Middle East is concerned. So from the options proposed, I don't think that moderate Arab countries are going to send troops into Gaza. They are not looking to enter into the situation that they know is hopeless in many ways. They cannot and will not fight Hamas because of their own public opinion, which is very much supportive of Hamas, and the idea that they will be there to defend Israel is simply a non-starter. What they will do is prevent Israel from operating in Gaza, because you cannot, just walk over their heads, and this is not a possibility. The Palestinian Authority is weak, is corrupt, has other problems, is anti-Semitic, continues to deny the legitimacy of the Jewish state. It does a very important work in the parts of the West Bank that in which it is still able to exercise control, but only because Israel is there also to take military action against whatever target there is there. In the Gaza Strip, it's even weaker and is likely to remain weaker. The only advantage of its coming into Gaza, if it agrees, because it is very much aware of its weakness, and therefore a spokesman for the Palestinian Authority always talk about sharing power with Hamas in a kind of national unity government. So the only good thing that may come from them coming is first that they assume civilian responsibility, including on the distribution of the supplies, which will still be controlled also by Hamas. But the second advantage is that Israel will be able to continue operating there in the same way that it operates in the West Bank.
You've been quite critical of Israel's approach to ensuring humanitarian aid. I think you've also been critical of generally the Western response to Israel's military actions. Can you expand on some of those, please?
So let's start with the second one, perhaps. The shock of Western public opinion is understandable. It's estimated, we have no way of finding out whether the figure, corroborating the figures suggested by the health authorities in Gaza, which are Hamas authorities. So, but let's take the figures as they are, So it's there has been in Gaza some maybe between 30,000 and 35,000 dead. According to the spokesman of the estimates of the Israeli military, about maybe 13 or 40,000 of them are Hamas warriors. So we know that that some say 20,000 are civilians, some of them are women and children and all that. This is a very heavy and regrettable toll in terms of human life and all that, civilian human life. On the other hand, we must understand that if you have a fanatical organization that embedded itself so deeply into the civilian fabric, that has created the labyrinth of tunnels under buildings, that uses booby-trapped buildings, and it's practically impossible to destroy it without so-called collateral damage. Now, the two questions therefore arise. First, compared to the performance of other democratic militaries by the most liberal countries, how does this rate of, say, one Hamas warrior to 1.5 civilian? I'm sorry that I'm using this abysmal terms, but there's little way of avoiding it. So how does it compare with, say, the American record in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the French record in Africa, British record in Iraq, and so forth? And the truth of the matter is that it compares favorably. In Fallujah, for example, the Americans killed 1 Iraqi warriors to 3 civilians, non-combatants. So this is in terms of what can be expected of the best liberal militaries of liberal countries in the world. Second, the question is, what precautions has the country taken in order to minimize casualties? And again, Israel before any action gave warning to the population, including by very advanced digital means. It opens humanitarian corridors for the population to leave, took other precautions. So again, in comparative terms, Israel has done the utmost. The most critical question in terms of principle is this. If an organization like Hamas, a jihadist organization like Hamas, embed itself in the population to that extent, does it mean that it gains immunity? I don't think that Western public opinion asks itself the question, that it understands the question, that it faces it head on. Now, I should say that no country in the world has ever accepted such a principle, that the laws of war have never, included such a conclusion. So by these standards, I think that Israel, on the whole, has conducted itself within the laws of war, morally, as far as the best standards of liberal militaries have been. The only element where Israel failed, at least at the beginning of the war, was letting supply into Gaza. Now, I'd like to mention that in the wake of the massacre, and with the Gaza population crowds cheering in the streets, it was almost unimaginable in terms of Israeli public opinion that we are going to continue feeding them and all that. However, the international law requires it, and after a period of the supplies has been allowed by Israel into the Gaza Strip. Now, I'd also like to add, because we hear a lot of report, nobody is dying of starvation in Gaza. There used to be a severe shortage of food, but nothing like the scenes that we have been seeing in civil war, particularly around the world, in Yemen today, in Ethiopia, of people dying of starvation. Nothing of this happened. This is the distinction that also needs to be borne in mind. There was a severe shortage of food. This has been corrected.
Okay, thank you. Just one last question. So, Ben-Gurion famously said that we need to fight need to get this right. We need to fight the war. We need to fight against the Nazis as if there was no British white paper preventing immigration, and we need to fight against the British, the white paper, as if there was no Second World War. You kind of took that and said, we need to fight against Hamas as if we weren't critical of Netanyahu and the government, and we need to battle against Netanyahu and the coalition as if there was no war against Hamas. So
Oppose. I was careful to refrain from the word battle in the terms of internal domestic
oppose, yes. It's not obviously not the same. If you could just kind of expand and explain A, what you mean, and B how that's done.
So one of the great disadvantages of fighting this war is that Netanyahu originally and still originally led a far-right coalition. He took into the coalition the far-right, two far-right parties, which usually would not be allowed into the right-wing coalition, but that he took because center and center-left parties would not join his government following the constitutional crisis in Israel a year ago. This gave the Israeli cabinet and this was not helped by expressions by members of the government that actually have no effect on the actual the formulation of policy, but still are regarded by the outside public opinion as true representatives of the Israeli cabinet. This truly aggravated the Israeli image abroad. Partly this was helped by, against this, there was the joining of the centrist party of Gantz and his fellows into an emergency government after the outbreak of the war. And they are now on the verge of leaving the government. It's not that they take issue so much with the current policies, but there is a mixture of political and substantial issues that probably would lead to them leaving the government within a week. Now, what I fear, I think this is the gravest threat now to the conduct of war by Israel. What I fear is that once left alone with his far right-wing partners, Netanyahu's government will be regarded as totally illegitimate by foreign countries, and that in Israel itself, among the very strong opposition to Netanyahu, especially among the public, this would be labeled now as Netanyahu's war rather than as Israel's war. And as I see this as Israel's war, and a very crucial one, I view this with this prospect with much concern.
Okay, that was a very, very comprehensive look at a lot of the different angles, the diplomatic, the military, the domestic, the tactical, the strategic. Thank you very, very much. And we hope that everyone enjoys the recording. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.